Hey everybody, wanted to jump in real quick before we get going on this podcast. This interview was recorded in December of 2025 and it is now January of 2026. And the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving has a new name. It is now called the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. So you will hear us refer to Meher's employer as the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, but please note the new name of the foundation is the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation. So just wanted to jump in real quick and correct ourselves before we get going on the podcast. But without further ado, please enjoy this podcast with both Meher Shulman and Michael Corley. Hello and welcome to the Nonprofit Thrivability Podcast by Beyond the Blog. I'm your host, Read Corley, podcast producer and consultant with the Patterson Foundation. Today, we are joined by Meher Shulman of the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving and Michael Corley of the Patterson Foundation. Our discussion looks at how the two foundations, working with no margin, no mission, have helped nonprofits pursue entrepreneurial approaches to mission impact. The Patterson Foundation funds Margin and Mission Ignition, an initiative here on Florida's Sun Coast, while the Hartford Foundation leads a similar effort in Connecticut through the Social Enterprise Accelerator. We will explore how these initiatives began, why earned income matters, and what both communities are learning as their work grows. So without further ado, please welcome Meher and Michael. Meher, Michael, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about how the Patterson Foundation shares and no margin, no mission connects to strengthen the nonprofit sector. We're going to tackle this interview chronologically, starting with when the Patterson Foundation and No Margin, No Mission began the relationship, working our way to when the Hartford Foundation and No Margin, No Mission began their relationship, into the present time, and then into the future. So with all that being said, let's start with Michael here. Michael, let's start at the beginning. Take us back to 2012. How did the Patterson Foundation first connect with No Margin, No Mission?
Well, actually, it's a funny story, Reed, and I appreciate that question. It actually started in 2011. They reached out to us. So they unsolicited sent our CEO, Deborah Jacobs, an email, and she promptly filed it into the delete file and said, no sense, and did respond to them, says, no sense reaching out to us. There's no money and we're not interested. But interestingly, she and I had a conversation, and I said to her, well, that's kind of an interesting concept, whole earned income. So she forwarded an email to me. I reached out to them. And so that started the relationship. Now, about the same time, they had reached out to the Community Foundation of Sarasota County, and a partner of ours. So we were able to initially do some collaborative work with the Community Foundation. Meanwhile, we were vetting Mike and Larry, and Meryl probably think this is so funny. We literally vetted them every which way to Sunday for about a year until we engaged them to do our work. So we've known them for quite some time. It was a slow relationship at the front, which would make sense because we were just getting our sea legs as an organization. And then since then, we just had a wonderful relationship with them.
So starting off with a deleted email, so what made the Patterson Foundation decide that strengthening nonprofits through earned income strategies was the right path after all that time?
Well, the timing was coming out, if you remember, we're coming out of the recession. It was a horrible recession that really impacted funders' ability to finance and fund nonprofit organizations. On the flip side, nonprofits were struggling because the asset size of the endowments had dropped and a lot of funders had stopped funding. And our CEO, Deborah Jacobs, said, you know what? There's got to be a better way. There are alternative funding besides just counting on government and on the funders. And these organizations have assets, intellectual or whatnot, that probably can generate some revenue if they just learned how to generate and develop an earned income product. So that was the genesis of this effort, was just a recognition that there was a need in the community.
And I want to talk about one of the 5 catalysts for good, which is sharing. The other 4 catalysts for good are connecting, learning, evolving, and strengthening. So Michael, TPF is known for sharing resources, knowledge, and opportunities. How did that philosophy shape the early years of Margin and Mission Ignition?
Well, it's one of those things we knew in order to be successful, we wanted to expose it and offer it to all the nonprofits in our community. And this is a very big 4-county community. And so even to this day, usually it's an open invitation for the next cohort. And we'll probably talk a little bit about that. We want to encourage nonprofits to learn. And so we've set up a series of labs to provide free education on earned income. And then if it makes sense to go through the coaching and the consulting part of the business. And everything we do is documented on the website. So it's a sharing, it's letting everybody know what the opportunities are. And then when we have those cohorts, we spend a lot of time with them building relationships among themselves and bringing them other capacity building opportunities.
And before we get to Mayor and the Hartford Foundation, what does MMI look like today? The growth, alumni, and the ripple effects across the Suncoast nonprofit sector.
Oh, good Lord. We try to capture that and post it on the website. So now there are 35 organizations that have been through the original cohort. Multiple of them have gone through an advanced version, meaning they've gone through it again for a second opportunity. We bring those groups together once a year on what we call a Thrive and Dine, and that's an opportunity to share and to continue learning. We'll have a learning session aspect of it and allow them to share among themselves to strengthen those relationships. And then we also expose them, as I said, to other capacity building efforts that the Patterson Foundation embarks upon, like fueling dynamic fundraising. We figured we got this cohort of 35 that we have been knee deep with for 3, 6, 9, 10 years. So we want to continue to provide opportunities for them to grow and develop.
All right, thank you. And Mayor, now let's bring you in. How did No Margin, No Mission and the Hartford Foundation find each other back in 2018?
Well, I think our experience was quite similar to what Michael just described, where back in about 2017, we got a cold call from Mike and Larry. And I think similarly, we may not have been as receptive and responsive immediately. We didn't know who these guys were, but ultimately we did have the conversation with them, and they seemed very smart and thoughtful. We kind of liked what we heard off the bat. And I will say that having the Patterson Foundation and your initiative come before us was kind of a selling point, because there was a track record. They had kind of, quote, run the water through the pipes before. There had been some successes there to draw on. So I think without the Patterson Foundation's prior experience, we may have moved more slowly. Maybe there would have been a little bit more reluctance. But I think because you all had been through this and Mike and Larry presented some of the successes you had, we thought, let's give this a shot.
And so what was happening in the Greater Hartford area that made the Social Enterprise Accelerator a fit for the Hartford Foundation? What challenges were nonprofits facing at that time?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that there wasn't one particular, major challenge that organizations were facing, but I think it was just sort of the general challenge that nonprofits always have of raising money, and I think in particular of raising unrestricted dollars, which are kind of the holy grail of fundraising. So I think that's a perennial issue that nonprofits face, and being a capacity building organization and unit ourselves, we had a number of kind of tools in the toolbox to help organizations raise revenue, but we didn't really have social enterprise as one of the tools in our toolbox. And we thought, you know what, this would really sort of help round out our offerings in that area. So that's kind of why we decided to give it a go.
And so what you talked a little bit about proof of concept. Mike and Larry had proven it with the Patterson Foundation, but what made you confident that this model would work for your nonprofits up in the Greater Hartford area?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say we were confident. I think
Mm.
anytime you try something new, you don't know, you just kind of give it a shot. And I think that's always been the way that we've operated is let's do some vetting up front, like Michael did. We certainly did our vetting and due diligence up front. We thought, let's try this. And, I do think one of the things we've learned is that it's not for everyone. It's not for every nonprofit. And so we thought, well, for a certain segment of nonprofits, this could be very helpful. So again, we thought we knew enough to try it out and sort of to learn. I think that's always been our approach is, let's do something, let's learn from it, and then let's figure out what the next step is.
Absolutely. So now moving to present time here, what does the Social Enterprise Accelerator look like today? The growth, the alumni, the ripple effects that it's had across your community.
Yeah, so we're not in as long as Patterson, but we're in for about 7 years. We've had 4 cohorts. We have the 4th cohort going on now, and there have been 28 organizations that have participated. And there are a variety of interesting ventures that have happened. We have kind of a range of, venue and catering businesses. We have a floral business, which is actually doing quite well. We have a thrift shop that's getting underway. We have some gift shops attached to nonprofits that are doing well. So it's kind of a whole range of nonprofits that are in this initiative, and it's been very nice just to see how they've sort of cross promoted one another.
And are there any specific, early standout stories or wins that have illustrated meaningful change for your organizations?
Yeah, I think there are several of them. And again, I think, anytime you run a business, whether it's through this sort of an initiative or in the private sector, I think there will always be some organizations that dive in and do really well with it. I think there'll be others that kind of, it takes them a little bit longer and they'll have some challenges and pitfalls and they'll sort of figure out a path forward. And then I think there are some where, again, it may not kind of pan out the way they had imagined. So I'd say we have several of the ones that I mentioned that have actually done quite well, even though they have had ebbs and flows over time that are now, flourishing and are raising a good amount of revenue for their organizations.
Yeah, I mean, you guys had to deal with potentially the biggest ebb of COVID if you started this program back in 2018, 2019. So some of those first cohort organizations, I imagine, had to deal with quite a large challenge at the very beginning. I want to get back to the catalyst for good, and I want to talk about connecting. So, Mayor, what have you learned about the importance of relationships in sustaining this social enterprise work?
Yeah, I mean, I think relationships are really the kind of foundation of this work. So much of it is relational in so many different ways. And, I'd say there are a number of relationships that have been really important and valuable to these organizations. So I think first and foremost is the relationship with the organization's funders and donors, just making sure that they are kind of kept abreast of what's going on. And I think not just the challenges, it's always nice to share the challenges, but I think also some of the successes, I should say. It's always nice to share the successes, but also the challenges and some of the pitfalls, because I think these are your partners and they want to help you. And so I think if you share some of those pitfalls, they're happy to sort of step up and say, here's how we can help you. So I think just really communicating well with those folks. I think within the team at the organization, it's really key. I think, there are staff changes, there are board changes, but to the extent that that core team can keep up good communication and keep up that teamwork, I think that relationship is very important. I think the relationship with No Margin, No Mission and the consultants, they're always there. I mean, I'm sure Michael can attest to this, that Mike and Larry are super, super responsive. They're always there when you need them. They're there to brainstorm with you, and they're very flexible. So, as things change and stuff happens, right, within the organization and the environment, I think they're always right there to help you figure out kind of the next step forward. So I think that's a key relationship. I think the relationship across the participating organizations is also really helpful. I think both in terms of organizations that are doing like work, where I think there is this collaborative spirit where they're willing to sort of say, hey, I faced this problem before, and here's how I addressed it, and maybe that could be useful to you. And then even across the different types of organizations, how they can sort of support one another as part of kind of a network. I think that relationship is important. And then finally, I think with the Patterson Foundation, I'd say just sort of keeping connected. I think much of that happens through Mike and Larry, but just sort of learning from what one another is doing and has experienced can be really helpful to, I think, both of the communities. So all those relationships, I think, are really vital to making for a successful social enterprise.
Absolutely. And I have just a general question here. When it comes to the cohorts, do they ever deal with competing ventures? So the Patterson Foundation has 5 C's. It's caring, connecting, collaborating, contributing, and creating. And we say that competing is not one of those 5 C's. So do you ever have to manage that relationship within the cohort of competing ventures?
Yeah, and there are many like ventures. So we have several, for example, catering businesses and venue rentals. I have really been struck by how much more collaboration and collaborative spirit there is than competition. And maybe that's a little bit different from the private sector, but because they've created this sort of community, they really want to sort of see each other succeed and realize that, as it's sort of the lifting all boats metaphor, that I think all of them can survive and thrive in the environment. And they all have something slightly different to offer. So each of the venues, for example, is quite different and wouldn't be suited for every type of meeting or event. So they're really great about sort of cross promoting. And also, if someone comes to them and they say, I'm not sure our venue is going to be the best fit for you, but you know what? There's this other one that I think has what you need. So I think keeping up that that sort of knowledge of one another has allowed them to sort of cross promote. And then, for example, we also have catering in addition to venue businesses. So the venues will then sort of reach out to some of the catering businesses and say, hey, we'd like to have you on our preferred list. And so I'd say there's way more, and I'd love to hear what Michael thinks about this too, but I think there's way more sort of collaborative spirit than there is competition through a venture like this.
Absolutely. I think that insight is extremely helpful because I feel like a lot of organizations potentially would have that fear going into an initiative like this. So, Michael, yeah, let's get your opinion on the connections. How do ongoing connections, even informal ones, increase long-term success for these organizations?
Well, I can say ditto to everything Meher just said. It's almost comical how similar our communities are. Besides the fact that we're 1,000 miles apart, it's certainly collaborative by nature. I've determined that's why people are in the line of work that we're in. And competition they get, but they see the value of collaboration and the long-term connections. Read, you got to remember, entrepreneurship and developing a business, if you will, is a long-term game, and there's going to be ups and downs, like Meher said. And so to ensure you're communicating, ensure you're tethered to a standard and to a direction is really important to get through those times, and then to communicate and share that. And the value of having a cohort, having other executive directors, CEOs you can talk to commiserate with, to learn from, is invaluable to these folks because, you know, they are on an island and it's challenging. And so we try to continue to foster those relationships and connections so that they can benefit. And we get most excited when we hear that Executive Director 1 called Executive Director 2. We didn't even know anything about it till it comes up in a Thrive and Dine and they've been working together. So that's a lot of fun to hear that.
That's awesome. So, Meher, let's talk about the recent all-cohort learning session, which I was fortunate enough to participate in as a panelist. I found it impressive to be with so many interested, engaged, and entrepreneurial nonprofit leaders. And I'm interested to know what stood out to you from that session.
Yeah, and Reed, I have to say the group so appreciated your being there and got so much from your little piece about podcasting. So thank you for that. I will say that I think the cohorts really love coming together. Anytime we've done it 3 times now, and each time we have a great turnout. They love being in the room together. I think part of it is they like feeling that they're not alone, that there are others who have been through this and have been through some of the tough times too. And I think there's real value in that. And that they're struggling with similar questions and challenges. So again, it's not like it's unusual for that to happen. I think they really love coming together and sharing their successes, you know, what's worked well, and to really celebrate those successes in the group. And I think they get lots of support for those successes from the others. But I think also talking about, you know, what are some of our challenges and really brainstorming together. And I think Mike and Larry do a great job of sort of having them in various groups through the course of the session, really talking together about, you know, what's really working or what's not working and how can we address that, and really problem solving together. And I think, you know, when you bring all those brains together in the same room, there are all sorts of useful ideas that emerge just from being there. And going back to what we said before, I think that collaborative spirit really shines through during a session like that.
Collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. And speaking of that, Meher, why was it important to bring some Patterson Foundation voices and no margin, no mission voices together for this event up in the Hartford area?
Yeah, and I think once again, we are the beneficiaries of the Patterson Foundation having gone before us, and the beneficiaries of having Mike and Larry straddle both those communities. So they're the ones, you know, we were talking about kind of changing up the agenda for that all cohort session, and they had recently done the Thrive and Dine with the Patterson Foundation and had kind of figured out a couple of things that worked. So they came to us and said, hey, what if we had Reed come and talk about podcasting, or have Jennifer Abbott come and talk about AI. And those were topics we had heard from our nonprofits that they were particularly interested in as well. So again, I think it was the value of kind of having this kind of cross-community collaboration between us and the Patterson Foundation, and having Mike and Larry know so intimately what Patterson was doing. So I think we did change a few things up on our agenda, but I think what Patterson had done before us was really, really helpful in shaping our agenda.
Well, it was a pleasure to be a tiny part of that day. So thank you so much for having me. And I want to move along here. This question is going to be for both of you all, and I'll start with Michael for this one. How are each of you leveraging the entrepreneurial successes in your respective communities to maintain momentum and strengthen and continue strengthening the nonprofit sector? We'll start with Michael and then go to Meher.
Yeah, I think it's kind of what we've already discussed. We take this cohort and we continue to feed it and foster it, not only for margin mission ignition, but for our other side-by-side initiatives or other initiatives, because we've got this relationship, we have this understanding, and we've leaned heavily on Mike and Larry. So being able to then introduce like fueling dynamic fundraising as an opportunity, the internship program, we've vetted these organizations already, so we're able to continue to leverage that relationship and offer them more and use them as a test pilot, if we will, before we go to the broader nonprofit community. We certainly don't want to exclude the other nonprofits, but this is a great testing ground for us to pilot new initiatives and then to bring those out to the larger group. So we plan on continuing to do this really as far as the future holds, to continue to work with those organizations.
Absolutely. And Meher, how are you all continuing to leverage the entrepreneurial successes of these nonprofits and strengthening your sector?
Yeah, and I think very similar to what Michael is saying. I think, we see our role as making a variety of opportunities, kind of capacity building opportunities available to nonprofits, but then really putting them in the driver's seat to decide, which ones are going to be a good fit for them. And like we said before, it's not going to be for everyone, but I think for those that do take advantage of it, there can be great benefit. And I think for those for whom it is a good fit, I think what we've heard from them is that it really broadens opportunities for their organizations to bring in new donors, new volunteers, new stakeholders, and really open up some new opportunities that they didn't have before. And I think regardless of the amount of revenue that's generated through this venture, which is clearly one of the main goals, I think there's so many other sort of benefits that can accrue to an organization. I think they really learn through this process how to use a business mindset, how to use entrepreneurial thinking in other aspects of their work. And I think some of that is very attractive to new donors, new volunteers, new stakeholders. And I think to re-energize maybe some previous donors that had lapsed who think, oh, we really like this new work the organization is doing, so maybe we'll sign on again. So I just think there's so many sort of benefits that accrue as a result of the program.
We completely agree. And Meher, staying with you for this one, how can both foundations continue to share, connect, and amplify nonprofit strength? I know you guys do a lot through your nonprofit support program, and the Social Enterprise Accelerator is just one section of that. But how can you guys continue to share, connect, and amplify nonprofit strength?
Yeah, I think mostly by staying in touch. And again, I think Mike and Larry are kind of the link between us. So they're constantly sort of telling us, well, we tried this in Sarasota and it worked, or we learned this lesson. So we're constantly hearing that and adapting. And I think the other nice thing that's happened among the participating organizations is I think some of them have learned about some of the ventures in Sarasota. So I think there have been some connections where they've called up an organization in Sarasota and said, hey, you've done something similar, and we're facing this roadblock, and what might you recommend for us? So I think just keeping those linkages mostly through Mike and Larry, and just constantly thinking about how we can learn from what the other one is doing.
That's incredible that some organizations have taken it upon themselves to reach out to similar organizations down here in Sarasota for information. That's incredible. Michael, how can both foundations continue to share, connect, and amplify nonprofit strength?
Well, I don't know if I have much to add to what Meher said. Mike and Larry have just been a great conduit, and we have benefited as well. While we may have gone first, they have learned quite a bit up in Hartford and have brought that to Sarasota. They have brought people into our Thrive and Dine. So, like Read, you being on the most recent one up there a few years ago, we had we beamed people into ours, and those connections were formed. So it's that intentionality of connections that will continue to foster both of these initiatives.
And wrapping it up here, Meher, in one sentence, what does strengthening the nonprofit sector mean to you?
Well, I guess it's hard to sort of wrap it up in a nutshell, but I'd say maybe equipping nonprofits with the tools that they need to build systems that help them deliver their missions more effectively and efficiently, and also allowing them to build networks that help all nonprofits and the whole nonprofit ecosystem to thrive.
Well, I mean, that's a great sentence right there. It sounds like a mission statement. I don't know if that came off the top of your head or not, but that is a great last sentence. Michael, what does strengthening the nonprofit sector mean to you?
Well, allowing those, I will add to what she said because she nailed it. It's create an environment those organizations can achieve what they need to achieve to fulfill their mission. And that's more than just fundraising. It's more than just business. It's more than just working with volunteers. And to give and prepare them, give them the ability, capacity, knowledge, wisdom in order to do what needs to be done to fulfill their mission.
Well, thank you both very much. Meher, before we get out of here, where can listeners learn more about the Hartford Foundation Social Enterprise Accelerator?
Actually, our website is probably the best way. Our website is HFPG, which stands for Hartford Foundation Public Giving.org. And there is a section under the Nonprofit Support Program on the Social Enterprise Accelerator. So that's probably the best place to go.
Awesome. And listeners, that will be up on the screen if you are watching. And then, Michael, where can people learn more about the Patterson Foundation's Margin and Mission Ignition?
Yeah, similarly, our website, thepattersonfoundation.org, spelled out thepattersonfoundation.org. Go to current initiatives and you'll see it right there under Margin, Mission, Ignition.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for your time today. I know the listeners will have gotten a lot of value from this, and I really appreciate you both being here today. Thank you for listening to the Nonprofit Thrivability Podcast by Beyond the Blog. For more information, please visit thepattersonfoundation.org.